July meeting of the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. This is the business meeting at 7:45 a.m. And we're still in this unusual pandemic world, I regret to say. And before I say anything else, I'll say to all you people that are listening or that are watching us and we can't see you, it leaves me pretty uncomfortable. I would really rather see you, and particularly when we get around to discussing the things that you want to talk to us about, I would really like to be able to see you, but I don't have control over that. So, Tanya, will you or Aaron or Colette call the roll, please?
Okay, I'm on it. Nick Fountain.
Here.
Kay Webb.
Here.
Travis Bailey is either going to be late or will not attend at all. If he does not show up, he is considered excused. Ian Dunn.
Here.
Rashay Height.
Here.
Heather Leah. Janine McAuliffe. Okay, we still don't have her audio going, but I saw her head nod and we can see her. Katie Pate.
Here.
John Reese.
Here.
Susan Singer.
Here.
Oh, thank you. Jimmy Team.
Here.
Gatson Williams.
Here.
All right. So I think what I want to welcome everybody, and particularly welcome the new members. We're really excited to have you. We're missing the ones who are gone, but we're really glad to have each of you. And because of that, I want to take a moment here and go down through and have everyone introduce themselves. And I will call on you, and I will follow the list that's on the agenda there. So I will start off. I'm Nick Fountain, and I'm the chair this year. I'm starting my 53rd year practicing law and my 10th year on RHDC. And that's my last year, I might point out. But anyway, it has been an honor and a privilege to do this job and to maybe keep a few things from being torn down. Kay Webb.
Good morning. This is Kay Webb. I am the vice chair of the commission, and I also serve as the chair of the nominating committee. I am beginning my 6th year on RHDC, so I'm in my last year as well. So welcome.
And I'll skip Travis Bailey. Ian Dunn.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ian Dunn. I'm the chair of the research committee. Started out on the COA committee about 2 years ago. This is be my 3rd year on the commission.
Rashay Height. We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Rashay Height. I am new to the commission. I am a local architect. I practice at Vines Architecture and have been practicing in the North Carolina area for about 8 years now.
Well, we're really excited to have you and glad you're serving. Heather?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Heather, and I serve as chair of the Awareness Committee. I've been with RE for about a year, and I also write a lot of local history. Love documenting Raleigh's history and making sure it stays alive.
For some reason, your mic is breaking up a lot, and I don't know what the reason might be, but maybe you can work on that.
Can you hear me better?
When Heather says she writes a little history, she is not kidding. It's an understatement. She's really doing great work. Say something else. Let's see if we get that mic right.
Thank you. Let me see. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's a little bit better. It was just coming in and out a little bit.
I had it set on my phone. It's probably
maybe some delay in there. Janine? Unmute. There you go.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, Okay. Well, I didn't expect that. Now I'm not prepared. No, just kidding. I am Janine McAuliffe, and this is my second term as being commissioner on RHDC, and I've really enjoyed it. Lined up for another round. And I'm a local designer at a design build firm here in Raleigh, and happy to be back.
Great. Katie. Katie Pate.
Yeah, Peter. I'm Katie Pate, and I'm the incoming secretary treasurer here at the RHDC, and I'm starting my second year. Started off on research committee last year and moving over to community awareness this year.
And John Reese.
Good morning. My name is John Reese. I am a architect by profession. I guess you might say an innkeeper by design. And this is my first year. I'm just nominated and just fresh off the boat and excited to do it. So I think I'm on the research committee.
And we'll come back to the committee structure later, and we'll go through that and we'll see how those things fit. And if we need to fine tune anything, we'll get to that later in the agenda. Susan Singer, we're glad to see your face now.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be joining. I'm a new member of the committee, and I'm relatively new to Raleigh, I suspect, compared to other people who've been there for a long time. But I'm very excited to help my home become part of history and part of the 21st century. So, and I'm involved in lots of other things in the city.
Well, that's great. Jimmy Team.
Jimmy Tame. I am a landscape architect emeritus, and I've been in service for 4 years.
Okay, and Gaston.
I'm on my second term. I'm excited to be back again, and glad to see new faces. We always need a new injection of energy, and you'll soon see the city's undergoing an interesting metamorphosis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we're having to figure out how to deploy this new energy in this remote world we're having to live in at the moment, and still find ways to get stuff done. And so thanks everybody. At this point, I would call for a motion to approve the agenda. Gaston, you make that motion? So we need to, let's see, Gaston got it.
I so moved.
All right, Mr. Team, will you second? All right, any discussion, any changes to the agenda? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, I can see the faces, and I suppose everyone else can. So that motion carries. There were minutes from the June meeting, which was also done virtual. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of June 16?
So moved.
Mr. T makes that motion. Deneen seconds the motion. I see her hand go up. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, I hear lots of ayes. That motion carries. If it were a more significant thing, I'd probably call the roll and make that a little clearer for everybody, but that carries. So the first thing that we need to do today is hear about a rezoning case at 400 and 410 Glenwood Avenue, the former Pine State Creamery. And before we do that, I would ask that staff remind us of what our responsibilities are with respect to a UDO review.
Yes, sir. Hi, Tanya Tully here. When you, under the Unified Development Ordinance, RHDC's role when it comes to rezoning cases is to review and make a recommendation on whether or not you think city council should rezone the property, and you are thinking about it in light of either the historic landmark, as in this case, or historic district if the rezoning is in a historic district. They're not always in districts or designated properties that happen to also have a certificate of appropriateness review. That is the case in this one, however. And so that's it. Next up, we have Ira Mabel, who is planning staff, and he's going to give a presentation briefly that I can put up as soon as you are ready for that, Nick.
All right, we are ready for that. So, let's keep that moving. I will say, Kay, that I got to walk out the door at 9 because I got a 9:10 appointment. So let's keep moving.
All right.
Okay, who's going to supply the audio here?
Good morning. This is Ira Mabel from the Comprehensive Planning Division of the Planning Development Department. I will try and be brief, but if anyone, especially people who are new to the commission, want to stop and ask me a question about rezoning, I'd be happy to. But I'm sure you want to spend your time asking questions of your applicant. So this is a rezoning request that we have that's been submitted. Is for 400 and 410 Glenwood. It's about 2.4 acres. It's not quite the whole block. There's the railroad sort of divides a third of it off on the west there. So the current zoning is downtown mixed use district, 7-story height limit, and a shopfront frontage. And I have a picture of that later. And their request is the same zoning district, so DX, downtown mixed use, but for a 40-story height limit. And some zoning conditions, which I'll explain. So this should be completed in the coming weeks, and Planning Commission review lasts for 90 days. Should they decide to use it all?
Ira, can you give us just a brief orientation to landmarks around the property?
Sure, I have some slides about that. Absolutely. So just the next slide, Tanya, shows a little bit of a better picture. I always find that our map of DX is impossible to tell what's what. So you can see the gray box in the center is what we're talking about, and the zoning north and south of it is all the same, DX7. This is part of downtown that transitions to lower intensity. So that blue is office, and that pink in the top left corner of the map is mixed commercial. And all of the story limits go lower. So this is sort of towards the transition zone of downtown into more neighborhood zoning. Next slide is an aerial. So this block is about halfway between P Street and Jones Street on Glenwood. So just north of where the railroad splits. You can see some other development happening around Capitol Boulevard and Peace. So a couple of the rezoning cases we've had. And the Smoky Hollow phases 1 and 2 are in various stages of construction. The next slide is a bit closer aerial of the site itself. Wrong
direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's dark.
I think Tanya was fixing her slide view. Yep. So on the aerial, if you go back one, Tanya, the historic building known as the Creamery, so the former Pine State Creamery, is that L-shaped if you add in the original structure and the 2 additions that have happened over the years. There's also another single-story commercial building on the corner, on the southwest corner there, that is included in the request. And I just labeled a couple other of the more notable developments in the area. So a couple other apartment buildings nearby, and the a good view of the train tracks there, which are grade separated, so no access issues. The next slide the zoning conditions. So when a person is requesting rezoning for their property, they can submit additional rules, or we call them conditions, that become part of the ordinance, so the governing regulations on the property. So these persist or are in effect until someone rezones again or goes through this process again. So there are 5 in this case. The first one is prohibiting some uses that are otherwise allowed in the downtown district, or DX district. The second one is requiring, and these are abbreviated, they're not the full language of the condition, but the second one is requiring a certificate of appropriateness for height, massing, and setback prior to submittal of a site plan. So this would otherwise be required since the creamery is a historic landmark. But my understanding of your process is that this is just adding a little bit more specificity about what they're going to be submitting in their COA and the timing. The condition number 3, which I'll have some more slides about, is talking about preserving some of the historic building that's already there. So I'll get more into that later. Number 4 is talking about the sidewalk width on Glenwood Avenue, and then what we call a frontage for the rest of the site. So a frontage is part of the UDO that rules that can be added to a mixed-use district that regulate how the building relates to the street. So all sorts of things, the setback, where parking can be, the number of pedestrian entrances, what the streetscape should be. So like a suite of rules about how that works. And then the next slide is just the last number 5 condition, which is that they're going to provide a Cintrix bike share station in a location to be determined with help from the city when we decide where that should be. A couple photos. So the number 1 there is the original creamery. That's the northernmost part of the building. The number 2 is about midway down the block on Glenwood. You can see I added the dashed line there that shows where that condition where they say they're going to preserve the building. That is not the entire structure. It specifically calls out the original creamery building and the first addition, which both have the same color bricks, so look pretty similar. And then the third addition is the southern part, or on that to the right of that white dashed line. So where that vestibule is, and then the Mexican restaurant. So they are not promising to retain that building. And then the third picture is is the second building on the site, on the corner of Glenwood and North Street. So the next slide is a bit of a picture of where the historic landmark boundary exists. So there is a historic landmark designation, a local designation on this building, which covers all of the site basically, except for the second commercial building. So it's, again, I'm sure Colette or Aaron will explain if needed, but it's my understanding that anything that happens on the site, regardless of whether it's to the existing building or otherwise, would require a COA from you all. And then the next slide is just another clear picture of what the part of the building that they are saying they're going to preserve in the zoning condition. This is a picture from the Unified Development Ordinance of what a shopfront frontage is. So that language that they say the new development, so that not the historic creamery building, but other new development will follow. This is just an illustration from the code about what that looks like, and you can see some of the numbers there, what it regulates. Parking can be primary setback, that sort of stuff. And then the last slide is a table we use to compare basically what someone could build today versus the request. I would say this table ignores the historic building that they're preserving. So we didn't do the math for that. So the actual site is 2.4 acres, but we subtracted out whatever the acreage of the creamery is. Really, the point of this analysis is to look at the difference between the existing and the request. And so since the creamery is staying the same in both, it's actually kind of a complicated model to run with a retrofit or reuse building. So this is really just for the parking lot and the part of the creamery, the second addition that they could potentially demolish. So currently today it could build around 275 units, and under the request, so the 40-story request could go up to over 1,000 potentially. This is a very crude tool, but it gives us a sense of scope, and helps us determine other requirements in the city, like stormwater and traffic analysis and that sort of stuff. And that is my last slide. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the rezoning process, or what we have today.
I think I would ask that most of you save your stuff for the applicants, because I really think we ought to use the time for the applicants if we can.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, who's going to speak for the applicants here?
Good morning. This is Jamie Schrader with Parker Poe. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. This is Jamie Schrader with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street. I'll speak on behalf of the applicants this morning, and our full team will be available to answer questions.
Okay, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Thank you so much for your time this morning. We're very excited to be before you today to discuss this mixed-use zoning and its historic elements on behalf of the applicant, Turnbridge Equities. But I'll note from the outset that this case is different from many of the DX cases you've seen in recent years for two reasons. First, we set an early goal to preserve the character-defining massing and elements of the creamery building and focus as much of the new development on the existing surface parking lots. So instead of just preserving facades, as many cases that you've seen recently, our proposal at the outset contemplates retaining the majority of the character-defining portions of the creamery building. And second, we are proposing a two-phased approach to the certificate of appropriateness. The first phase will be during this rezoning process, where we'll seek a certificate of appropriateness for height, setback, and massing. And the second will follow at the site plan. So it's really just a first phase to kind of get to take a first bite at the overall massing, and then a full COA will follow. Next slide, please. This shows the two parcels outlined in red. Both are zone DX7 SH and are within the central business district of the future land use map, which calls for the most intense uses in the downtown area with heights reaching up to 40 stories. We're also designated within the core transit area, which is that mauve overlay, which supports the 40-story height as well. We'll focus on the larger 410 Glenwood parcel, which contains the Pine State Creamery building. So while both parcels are submitted in the rezoning request, it's only that 410 that has the designation. Next slide, please. As Ira mentioned, the building is on the National Register of Historic Places and was designated as a Raleigh Historic Landmark in 1998, mainly due to its Art Moderne style and the 1920s and 40s portion of the building that we're proposing to preserve. The historic designation is over the entire lot, but as you see here from the picture, that also includes some of the surface parking lots and later additions to the building. Next slide, please. These pictures show the site in the context of the various angles of the city, and I won't spend too long, but I think it is noteworthy that you see several of the other more recent developments kind of in the background in the larger context. Next slide, please. This shows the site in the context of other 20 and 40-story rezoning or zoning designations within downtown, and photographs or renderings of the several recent rezonings. So our site there is outlined in red. All of the pink or salmon color you see is all of the zonings that are either already zoned 20 or 40 stories. And then the photographs you see are some of those more recent 40-story or higher designations that that you've entertained over the past couple of years. And as I mentioned, you'll recall many of these contain limited elements of preservation, but there have not been any zoning applications that we're aware of that would voluntarily offer what we're offering here to preserve the majority of a historic building. But in order to save that much, the focus of our new development must be on height on the remainder of the lot. And we're trying again to focus that on the surface lots. Next slide, please. Our team includes Morris Adjmi Architects, which focusing on historic architecture throughout the United States. Turnbridge Equities, the new property owner and developer who has a history of developing projects sensitive to context. Next slide, please. And Clearscapes, who have handled many historic projects throughout Raleigh, including all of the restoration completed on the Creamery building since it was converted from its industrial use. Next slide, please. This slide shows the historical periods of the building, which began with the 1928 construction, the 1947 addition, the 1962 addition, and the 1998 towers. These elevations at the bottom help illustrate the Art Moderne features in the 20s and 40s portion, which were noted in the designating ordinance and by IRA. And it shows you how different those elevations appear compared to the later 1962 and 1998 editions. Next slide, please. Another desire for the site was to include a mid-block pedestrian corridor, both to pull pedestrians into the site, but also to separate the historic building from the new construction. These pictures on your screen are several representative examples of what has been done in other cities to achieve this balance. Next slide, please. This just shows the existing site elements in relation to the railroad and Smoky Hollow developments. You can see the overall creamery and surface parking lots. Next slide, please. And this slide hones in on the portions of the creamery building which we're proposing to preserve and kind of identifies those opportunities for development in the surface parking lots. Next slide, please. This slide shows the concept of where new buildings and construction could be placed. We're trying to focus this again on the existing surface lots and have two structures, one near the railroad, bringing that massing kind of away from Glenwood Avenue and away from the historic creamery building, and then another 400 block, which allows for space in between the historic building and the new construction, both north-south and east-west. So what we're doing is kind of pulling that back as much as we can to the opposite sides of the lot to give the creamery building some space and allow that new pedestrian corridor to flow through. This also gives us the opportunity of placing the structured parking closer toward the railroad and that massing. As Ira mentioned, that's an elevated corridor and leave the historic creamery building in its two-story condition. Next slide, please. And I'd like to just kind of tie the conditions and to what I know Ira mentioned these, but I think it helps to kind of understand some of the intent behind them, and we're happy to answer questions. The first condition is just the prohibited uses that you routinely see. The second is noting that we will pursue that certificate of appropriateness before the site plan submittal. In reality, that will come probably in the coming months and will be a separate process before your COA committee. Number three is just a summary of preserving the 1928 and 1940s addition to the historic 1928 and 1940s portions of the buildings, and noting that that's the area that we're proposing to save and otherwise maintain, but having a provision should some catastrophic event happen that we will be able to rebuild. And then fourth, Ira noted the streetscapes. The intent there is to provide shopfront.
Could you back up 2 sentences? There was a noise chaff that didn't enable me to hear your second sentence ago.
Sorry, my home phone rang and it.
No, that wasn't it. It was a white noise. Back up 2 sentences, please, if you could.
Sure. I believe I was on condition 3.
Yeah, and something to do about unforeseen circumstances or something.
Sure. The first portion of that sentence notes that we will preserve the 1928 and 1940s edition. The second sentence notes that, should some sort of, natural catastrophe or issue happen where the building is somehow destroyed, say a hurricane, that we would be able to rebuild. And the intent of these really is to just show our commitment to preserving the main character defining portions of the creamery. But we look forward to discussing with staff and with you all the different ways in which that intent can be manifested in the zoning as we go through the process. The fourth.
Jamie, I think maybe your papers or whatever you're reading from are hitting the speaker or something. So that I think something's producing this periodic interruption we're getting in your connection. So I don't know whether you've got something there that's hitting the phone or whatever, but we're getting most of it. And so you were down to either number 4 or 5 on your conditions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry for that inconvenience. I believe that the rest of the conditions are fairly self-explanatory in terms of trying to provide the maximum streetscapes we can, but as we're saving the historic building, some of those streetscapes are not sufficient to provide the full shopfront frontage. With that, we thank you for your time this morning. Our team is available to answer questions, and we're happy to be here.
Okay, well, let me start off with a couple. And Tanya, can you put the map back up that you just had there for a moment? I need you to explain how the shop front works in relation to the historic structure. I don't quite understand what that might do to the facade.
I'm glad you asked that. That's exactly why we created that frontage. Well, so the city designation encourages shopfront around the entire site. We're committing to that except for where we're saving the creamery building, because the shopfront frontage requires a 10-foot sidewalk and a 6-foot tree grate. And in some places adjacent to the historic building, we only have room for a 10-foot sidewalk. So we can't commit to providing the full shopfront frontage along those facades without running the risk of not having enough clearance and being forced to compromise the facade itself. So we've said instead, in those locations, we will provide the minimum 10-foot sidewalk, but not the full other requirements of the shopfront frontage.
Okay, that's great. Okay, Tanya, if we can go back to a view so that I can see all the commission members and call on them if they have questions of me, if I can see their faces. Okay, do any of you have questions that you want to ask? If you, I can go down the road and call on you by name, but if some of you have questions, want to raise your hand, then I can aim it that way as well. I don't see any hands moving, so I'll go down the list. Kay Webb, you got anything you want to ask?
No questions.
Ian?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Okay, Verche?
No questions.
All right, Heather?
No questions.
Thank you. Janine? All right, she nodded no. Katie?
No questions.
Thank you. And John Reese?
I actually do have a question. Is it appropriate to see a massing diagram of what the zoning would allow them to do?
I'd be glad to have them answer that question, but if I heard them right, we're going to have, or at least the COA committee will have a chance to review that aspect, or they got to get a COA. Now, we don't want them to wander into a trap here and with something at this point that would never work with the COA, but it's a little unusual since they're going to be coming through, sounds like coming through COA two times, exclusive of this session here.
Okay.
So, but go ahead with your question and repeat that, and we'll get whatever document up you want.
Well, I just wanted to understand exactly, for some reason, if in perpetuity, what the massing could be for that site should this development not go through, or someone else takes it over, or something like that. to understand exactly what anybody could do on that site with that kind of height, and just see a massing diagram relative to the rest of the Glenwood corridor.
Nick, this is Tanya Tully here. May I speak to that?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm sure the applicant will as well. So I wanted to clarify a couple things that because of the fact that this landmark, this is a landmark and certificates of appropriateness will be required for all exterior changes of the building and new construction on the site, regardless of the rezoning. There have been a lot of discussions about the timing of this. We also anticipate that if you have questions and want to see additional information, that you can come back next month and in August. They have shown staff some massing, and what Nick said is true, and you can ask to see that, but our guidance was, and they chose not to show it because the COA application will apply. Your point is taken, though, if for some reason it was no longer a landmark, the review would be different, but also, let me back up. Your point is well taken, that you're reviewing the rezoning as a change in perpetuity, regardless about whether or not these owners and applicants were to make the change.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Jamie, do you want to, on behalf of the applicant, you want to respond further?
Just briefly, thank you for that, Tanya. I do agree that that's how we're looking at it. And the reason that we've just left it with that 40-story designation is that we do anticipate going through that COA process in the coming months. We're not pushing it, to the fall. We're doing it now. And that will necessarily help us define the massing. So we think as this case goes forward, there will be additional kind of clarity about the massing itself, and didn't want to kind of preview that here so that we can have all of that information happen at the COA committee.
The other piece, I guess I would say, let me speak up again. When we get into these hybrid situations, I'll get back to you, Ian. We don't want to get in a situation where somebody's had communication with us in this setting, which looks like it would potentially be ex parte communication and conflict us out or whatever. So we couldn't hear it at the COA, and we totally undercut what we're actually trying to accomplish by backing into a mistake in some way. So there is that concern. And I've got one more question I'm going to ask Jamie, and then I thought I saw Ian's hand go up, and I'll get back to him. Jamie, the question from John Reese does raise the question of what happens if the folks ended up with property end up being taken over or whatever by people who weren't as conscientious, and the designation as a landmark goes away. What have you thought about putting a preservation easement on there so that doesn't happen no matter who winds up owning it later?
We've talked about. I guess let me first start by saying there is no intention to move on and dispose of the property. The property owners intend to develop this and hold it. But it's a good point, and I think we'll entertain all questions on that. I think what's significant about this is that even though it starts off as a 40-story rezoning, in a matter of months or whenever the COA gets around to deciding it, it'll help us evaluate how we look at the zoning conditions versus what has been added to the COA process. So we intentionally didn't want to add too much zoning to kind of prejudice the way the COA committee would look to this. As to the specifics of the preservation easement, I don't know if Fred Belding wants to chime in, but that's kind of the gist of how we've looked at the approach here.
All right. Anything else? Fred Belding, did you want to speak?
Hey, Nick, it's Gaston. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Gaston, do you have a question?
I did, and it can be saved for later, but real quick, let me express it so we can just footnote it. I would be concerned at some point in the process we may or may not have the ability to have input. But I'd be worried about what would happen if all the non-historic, the addition and all the other stuff was raised, and then the national economy tanked and Townbridge didn't have its financing set so that it could still go forward. We ended up with a demolition all around a historic site and no building being built, which has happened a couple times. I know that may not be our job, but I would sure want someone at Townbridge to address to someone their financing, how secure it would be if there's a downturn in the economy. It changes all their numbers.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Ian Dunn, did you have a question, or were you just scratching your head?
My question was answered. Thank you.
Okay, are there other questions now for the? Okay, I didn't hear anything. Is there anything else that applicants want to say before we have this?
I don't believe so. We're happy to consider some of these comments and provide more information at the next meeting as well, but we're happy to receive comments and answer any questions that come.
I'm sorry, somebody spoke, but I didn't hear it.
Nothing further at this time, but happy to answer additional questions.
Okay. Folks, what are your thoughts? What comments do you think you want to make? Do you want to make comments with regard to Gaston's financial concerns? Do you want to make comments about the what if the preservation easement or otherwise, or what do you think generally about the effort to work around the creamery building, and are you generally supportive, and do you think that's what we ought to be trying to express? So let's see, Mr. Team.
Yeah, just some quick comments. A number of the cases we have reviewed within the last year or so have been within the context of a national registered district rather than an individual property. So one of the things that occurred to me is with the rezoning as proposed, the height limit is actually over the entire property. It's not restricted to the back portion where the intention is to build the new building. And reminding myself that we can't prevent any building from being demolished. Eventually that's out of our purview. We can delay it. So one thing that would be,
Jimmy.
Yes.
I think you froze. I didn't hear the last part.
Not sure what the last part is, so I'll go back. So acknowledging that the zoning height restriction is over the entire property, not limited to the back half where they're planning to build new construction. As I noted earlier, this is not a district per se from a historic standpoint, but I'm curious about the responsibility or the context of the building's height, the present building's height relative to the streetscape. And, if the building came down, then we'll be looking at a potentially 40-story over the entire site, not just for that building footprint. And acknowledging, even though there's been questions asked about who's going to own it in the future, we talked about that earlier. We have no restrictions. The zoning is a legal thing, and whoever owns the property takes responsibility or takes possession of that as part of the ownership of the property. So I'm just putting out there as a thought. My sense is that what they've offered, as the existing creamery being preserved, seems like a pretty good strategy. As I said, when we were looking at the stuff over in the Depot District, there is a dramatic change, and this sort of goes back to what John Reese was asking about the massing pieces, is that if you look at the height of the existing building and looking at the potential for a 4-story building behind it, if this was a district, I would argue that there is something that is not in context, that there's a general height restriction. In this case, it's a landmark property. There's no district. So I'm conflicted, but I think under the circumstances, it seems like a good proposal. My concern is what happens if the creamery somehow disappears.
Got it. Okay, let's see, Gaston Williams. You need to unmute.
It's kind of the part of the same concern I had for viability going forward if they tear down all the buildings but the creamery, or tear down the creamery, and then I just don't want to lose the creamery and then not have them build the building behind it if that's what they want to do.
Okay, John Reese.
I was just sitting here thinking, I completely support the presentation in terms of the concept that they've done. I think it's fantastic. What I am wondering though is, can this be a sixth amendment to or addition to the situation to where they can say nothing on this site is going to be any higher than this, just so that there's something in that, just along the fact that they can't put a laundromat there or whatever. The thing was
What I'm hearing is that all of the concerns are about less about the project being a bad idea and much more about making sure it really and making sure that the building ends up being preserved, with the trade-offs of being what they are, in as much as this is an individual landmark. And so those kinds of comments are probably where we need to go with it. Whether that needs to be a comment and then let the applicant think about how to address that going as they work their way along. Because I feel sure that the whole question of the preservation easement will come up again when it gets to COA if it hadn't already been taken care of. Because we're all worried about what happens we're already worried the economy may tank anyway, quite apart from this project. So it's a very legitimate and very real concern in the minds of a lot of people at the moment. Yes, sir, Gaston Williams.
Could you pick a teammate? Don't pick me because I got stuff going on, but just draft our concerns off and let us give you the power to express them to the staff for us. We kind of know what we're thinking, right? Based on what we just said.
I'd like to think so, but we'll see. And I'll be glad to help with that, or I'll be glad to proofread something. How about is the consensus here that we're okay and generally supportive of the project, but we need to make sure that from a standpoint of preservation, that the original creamery building on that whatever it is, 1/4 of the block is that it really happens, it really gets preserved, even if ownership changes, even if financing becomes a problem. That we want to make sure that happens. Is that consensus? I'm seeing a lot of nods. I'm not seeing anyone expressing concern with it. If the consensus here is that we should move in that direction, then staff and I will work to write that up, and we will make sure that all of you get a chance to see what that language looked like.
Nick?
And we'll move forward from there. Tanya, is this presenting a structural problem moving this way?
Not really. What I would suggest is that we work with you to draft the memo and then bring it back next month to review and vote on at that time to make it extra clear. I also want to just point out that an easement could not be addressed through the COA process. It's not something that could be, made a condition of approval. But if it is something that you want to, suggest that they offer, you could put it in that memo, but it would need to happen either, just on their own or through the rezoning process.
All right, we're going to consider that as the action that we're going to take, and I'm going to designate John Reese to work with staff and me on that point, because John made the mistake of talking too much at his first meeting, and so now he gets something to do. So we'll move forward that way, but I'm always concerned that the applicants need to move And so, but fine, we'll get that taken care of next month, and we've got that addressed. Jamie, Fred, all the rest of you, I'm sorry I couldn't see you, but thanks for bringing this to us, and thanks for making this effort. I think the courtyard idea is pretty cool in the middle of that block, and I hope that this will end up working out for you and for the city more generally. I am concerned about the streetscape on Glenwood and what's that going to be like, but we're just dealing with one landmark today. So that takes care of that item, and we will move forward. And if we were all in one room, we could see Jamie and all of those folks heading for the door. But the rest of us now, we are dropped all the way down to officer elections. And for that purpose, I will call on Kay Webb, Chair of the Nominating Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We presented the slate from the nominating committee last month. That slate is for Chair Nick Fountain, for Vice Chair Kay Webb, and for Secretary Treasurer Katie Pate. So I suppose it is appropriate at this time to ask for nominations from the floor if there's somebody that's just hot to trot to be an officer.
I move that nominations be closed and that the recommendation of the nominating committee be accepted.
All right, and Jimmy Team seconded that motion. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 I see ayes all the way around. No, anybody vote no? All right, then that motion carries unanimously. I will say to the rest of you, be sure you understand that K maxes out next year, and I'm going to stop after four of these 6. And so we really do have to be thinking about how we're going to structure it going forward. So moving on to discussion items. First one is 220 East Morgan Street. And let's see, Tanya or staff, will you explain why we got this on the agenda? Other than that, I said maybe we should put it on there.
Colette, you're up.
So we wanted to bring this to you. It is not under any current preservation jurisdiction, but it is in the vicinity of both Moore Square and Capitol Square historic districts, which are across the street to the north and the west. And there are also a number of landmarks across the street to the north. So we wanted to ask you if this was a case that you wished to comment on because of its proximity to all these historic properties, or if you would like us to just state that there are no historic resources that will be adversely affected like we do with other rezonings that are not anywhere near a historic district.
So let me tell you where this property is. If you're on Morgan Street at the Capitol and you go toward the federal courthouse, you pass by the DOT, the old DOT building, and then you cross Blunt Street and the road begins to curve around to the left and become Newbern Avenue. And it's the property on the right side of that curve. And on the left side of the curve are some houses that have been restored. Some of them probably moved there. And it's pretty close to that whole cluster of buildings to its north and northeast. And so the question is, do you figure, well, it's not a historic tract in and of itself and we're not going to get bogged down in it, or do you want to try to comment on it? Okay, so now you see what I was trying to describe.
This is Colette. It's also, if you think about it, it's the parking lot behind Marbles. If that helps place anyone else.
Okay. So Gaston, what were you trying to say?
I see it now. I was oriented. I was just looking for where the Haywood house is.
Yes.
Well, whatever it's called, White Whitman or White whatever.
Yeah.
Haywood Hall, excuse me.
Yeah, and that is that Newbern Place where it dead ends because of the way this street comes around. And so you see why staff is asking the question, because of the White Holman, Montgomery, the Haywood Hall, all of the State Bank, all that stuff is right in there, but this is across the street.
Yes, sir. So this is Tanya. Because it is not in any district or designated, this is not something that you're required to review through the Unified Development Ordinance. If you want to make comments, then we'll bring it back next month with actual information and planner to describe the rezoning request.
Okay, if you pull the map down so we can see what the comments are and we'll deal with it. Do y'all want to hear more about it next month? That's all we need to know right now.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, and Verche said yes, and Kay said yes. So staff, if y'all will say, yeah, we are concerned about what could occur there and what it might do to the context. So if we put that on for next month, that would be a good thing. All right, I'm going to move on to committees. And I think we sent out a list laying out what the new committees would look like. I did, in the meantime, though, I've gotten an email from Travis Bailey, who couldn't be on this call. And Travis is between work and I think a new baby. He is asking off of the COA committee and needing to reshape things. And so we're thinking about, that means that we would need to move John Reese from an alternate up to the COA committee, so he would become more than an alternate. And he already got one little small job this morning, but he might be getting ready to get more. So we would need to do that. Before we act on this, staff and I sort of hauled off and did these committees. It looked like a decent fit for the various traits and talents and all that you all have. And but before I didn't call everybody or any of that, so I need to find out, are y'all okay? And do you have thoughts about what we ought to pull in as to make us another alternate for the COA committee or with any of these other committees? If anybody has a problem, let's hear it. Otherwise, we're going to go with this, and we'll try to designate somebody as an alternate for COA, where we're going to need to move John Reese up. We'll put Travis on another committee that wouldn't be quite.
That list distributed.
Say what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
My question was, you said a list was sent out. Was that sent out by email?
I can't, Tanya, how do we get the list out?
Sorry, it is attached to the agenda item in board docs. It was not emailed. So it's on the web as a draft item.
Okay. I've never seen it either.
But it sounds like we're going to be changing that, and once Nick tells us what the final determinations are, then we will send it out via email at that point.
In general, we were putting we had put Susan Singer and John on research, with John Reese as an alternate on COA. We may have to restructure a little bit. If he's going to be COA all the time, then maybe it's too much to have him on research as well. So that's why we're having to think about it. Then we're going to have Heather and Katie, and as well as Gaston on community awareness, and then Verche would be on COA as well. But we'll tinker with it, and we will email a draft of it as revised, and so you can be thinking about that in the meantime. We'll get you a better version with these changes in place. And so with that, we'll just move on from committees. Tanya, what do you want to say about commissioner training?
I just wanted to, and I'll keep this extra brief. You can read what's in there. The city of Raleigh and the commission therein is a certified local government. One of the requirements of being a certified local government is that staff and commissioners are trained annually. We have a number of opportunities that are available to us every year. One is the Preservation North Carolina annual conference, which will be in October. The other is the biannual National Alliance of Preservation Commissions Forum, which is like everything else, virtual this year in August. The commission does have funds to pay for y'all. Usually we have to pick and choose, but the NAPC forum is only $100 flat fee for everybody. And so anybody that is available and wants to attend, we can pay for it. I'll send out an email rather than do it now in lieu of time to let you know, find out who wants to be registered for that. And for the last thing is the State Historic Preservation Office is putting on trainings on YouTube that you can watch at your own leisure. I've got 2 of them linked on there on the agenda now. One is on architectural history. The next one that they've done is on local preservation enabling legislation, which is a good one there. And when I send out the NAPC email, I will also let you know what the requirements to prove that you actually attended that training so that we can track that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. And I would say to all of you, particularly anybody that hasn't done it, really try to do the NAPC, and particularly if we can do it with almost everybody being able to do it because it's going to be virtual. It's really good stuff. Usually there's a really good trip out of it. I got New Orleans and Baltimore out of it sometime in my former term. There were really good things, and this one here would have been somewhere like Tacoma or Seattle or whatever, but anyway, try and do it. It's really good stuff. And it'll, among other things, it'll make you think we're probably better than everybody else and we thought we weren't that good. So it's a nice thing. So try and do that. I'm gonna move to committee reports, and K-Web, anything for nominations?
Yeah, nominations committee, we have conducted the training for the new members, orientation, excuse me, for the new members. There's a possibility that we might have a resignation, so we're in the process of trying to identify an additional person to do that. So the committee is working.
And I'll tell you something, the committee has done some superb work to get the 3 new members that we've got here. And when we say committee, it's pretty much committee of K. And so she deserves some virtual applause or something. So thank you for that. Anything from community awareness? Gaston, has anything happened at all with that? You're like the last survivor.
Just real quick, we're encumbered by the COVID restrictions. It's kind of hard to gather people together to be excited about something when they're all wearing masks and fearful about being together. So we got to retool our organization efforts here, and Heather's still on it, I think, that's for sure. And she's a virtual. She's the gold reserve for all ideas on the Community Awareness Committee. So we need to probably restock the committee when you get a chance. And
so our goal here is to utilize Heather and Katie and Gaston to create our new virtual world and move us forward in that way, and hopefully do in 1 year what might have otherwise messed along and taken 5 years, because we're having to do it virtual anyway. So that, I think that's a good thing.
We talked about ideas such as a very small message, a video type message that is standardized and launched across all known platforms to us as a way of including Heather's and everybody else's, some way to highlight once a month something historic.
All right. Well, and the other thing we're going to have to figure is how are we going to do committee meetings? And we may have to rework the agenda here so that we can do them while we're on this platform, because we're not going to be able to have the virtual meetings of every committee, and that really hamstrings our efforts to move things forward. So we're having to rethink whether that means we're going to have to make this meeting an extra hour longer just to do the committee parts, or what's going to happen. But I would welcome ideas on that. Anything from research, Ian?
I have nothing to report.
Okay. All right, COA, I can tell you we've been busy. If you are new and you want to come watch, it'll be Thursday. We'll find a way to get you into that virtual meeting, which will run from 5 until about 8 o'clock on this Thursday evening. And we will probably go through a half a dozen hearings in that period of time. And it is a great way to see what is going on in the historic districts and with the change in the landmark. Lustron House, we got to get that back up and moving. And we're going to need to find a way we're going to try to find a way to pull Laurie Jackson as an advisory on that Lustron thing, because something's got to happen on that house. And that project sort of got killed and left dead in the water. And so we got to go with that. We've also got an ad hoc committee on Dorothea Dix Park to try to match them stride for stride in whatever's going on that. And if any of you who want to be involved in these ad hoc committees, we got to repopulate the Dorothea Dix ad hoc and also the Lustron. So I'm interested if y'all just send staff or me an email or something and say, yeah, I'd like to help on that. We would welcome that. Anything else for the good? Looking down through here, is anything from staff that needs to happen here now? Tanya, the rest of you got something to say?
Hi, Nick. The one thing that staff wants to add is that we are, and I think actually I sent y'all an email about this as well. Nominations are being sought for the Sir Walter Raleigh Awards for Community Appearance. So keep that in mind. Either fill out the form that we sent or send an email to staff so we can let our fellow our colleagues in planning know what projects that you think are worthy of being nominated.
What's that deadline?
I don't think there is a deadline yet. It's so early on it. I'll let you know if there is one.
All right. Main thing, folks, is it's a chance for us to highlight something that we saw riding through a neighborhood or we saw come through the COA, and we think those people ought to get an extra pat on the back and be a role model for others. And often if we nominate something, it'll end up getting an award. But we're in a position to know, and it's an opportunity for us to do that. And so think about what we've seen. And let's try to brag on the good stuff. Anything other than that, Tanya? Anything else? Gaston, I'll come back to you 1 second. Nothing from staff. All right, Gaston, anything?
Tanya, just as a separate item, would you send us the last list that was embedded in the meeting announcement down the bottom about where we stand on members and committees, just so we're reminded of it, please?
Yes, we will. Once I get clarification from Nick on where people are moving, we will send out a revised committees list. And also I will send out and I realized I forgot to do this in my last email, send out a contact list of all the commission members so that you know how to contact each other.
Yeah, we will get that done. And we'll try to move on these committees and all that this week so that if you got input you think that we need to hear, don't sit around, send an email so we make sure your thoughts got into the process. And as I said, we may have a vacancy here, so we're going to need some more nominees. And so help Kay out in that regard as well. So we'll work through that. All right. 8:55, that's actually pretty good work, considering we went through the Pine State as well. I want to thank everybody and be thinking about how are we going to accomplish preservation when we got to sit here and do it by computer screen, because it's still got to happen. And because the tear downs are still going to happen, and there's still a lot going on in Raleigh, and we want to do our part to help make it good. So, all right, I think that will do it. I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned, and I've got to go to the dentist by 9:10, and I assure you that will not be virtual. So I'll see y'all. I'll see y'all. Most of you, a lot of you, Thursday, and everybody else next month. Bye now.
Bye.
Hi, thank you.
Bye.